And the quote that was right there on the wall was a quote that in big words said, "Don't count the days, make the days count. Don't count the days, make the days count." And typically when I would, the routine of walking into the locker room to get myself dressed, get myself ready for whatever the workout or whatever practice or training was, oftentimes I would stop and I would read, what is the schedule, and I'd look at it quickly, reflect for a second. But for some reason with this one, I came walking in and I was in a daze and I read the schedule and I saw that, and then all of a sudden I just kind of stopped for a second. And that quote seemed to stick out to me more than others. Don't count the days, make the days count. Welcome back to The Thermostat with Jason Barger. If you're currently on a commute, a walk, or just a micro break in your day, glad you're making time to step back, to think, and to reflect on the next steps on your journey. I've never been more convinced. The best leaders and team cultures in the world are the ones that make time to step back and calibrate their thermostat. I hope today's conversation leaves you feeling grounded and inspired. Now let's dive into today's topic to engage our minds and hearts in order to authentically lead and create compelling cultures wherever we are in the world. Hey everybody, Jason Barger here, and welcome back to the Thermostat Podcast. Wherever you are listening or however you are coming to this podcast today, thank you for taking time to join in and tune in. If this is your first time as a part of the podcast, then welcome. I'm glad you are with us and hope you get excited to join us on the journey ahead. If you're somebody that's been with us from the very beginning, from seasons 1, 2, and 3, welcome back and welcome to season 4. Great stuff has happened in the past. So many wonderful reviews and feedback, and really appreciate everybody that's taken the time to share their thoughts about the way the podcast is evolving and growing. And thank you so much. So glad you're here. As always, I want this to be a place that wherever you are in your life, in your career, in your journey as a human, and certainly your journey as a leader within the confines of the group, the team, the organization, the family unit, the community, however you think about this, wherever you come to this as a part of that group, that team, I want this to be a place where you are able to step back. I want this to be a place where you're able to take a deep breath, and that this is a podcast that helps engage your mind and heart, helps you step back, helps this be a place for you to think, to be filled with positive thoughts and with intentionality and action to think about the impact that you have within that group, within that team, and certainly throughout the organization that you serve. So thank you for being here. I'm more convinced of this than ever. It seems like with every passing day in the world that we're in right now, I'm more convinced of this than ever, that authentic leadership and teams and groups, family units, friend units, communities, and certainly within teams and organizations, those that are able to create compelling cultures that bring out the very best of people's gifts, that help bring people together to align around a mission greater than ourselves and then connect it to purposeful action, are the ones that are compelling, the ones that are breathing life into ourselves and also to the people around us. So again, thank you for everybody who's being here, who's tuning in. I want this to be a place for you today, this week, and throughout your journey, a place where you can step back to think, reflect, and hopefully have your mind and heart engaged. So again, thank you for everybody who continues to listen, to subscribe, to share this, tell other people about it in your life and in your work about this way to be a part of these conversations. Thank you for everybody that takes the time to rate, 5 stars, of course, to review, to leave a nice review, and to, all of those ways help amplify these messages even further into the world. So thank you for taking a moment on whatever podcast platform you're listening and just rate and review positively and help share it with other people. I really appreciate it. So today I want to talk about something that has been on my mind a lot lately during these COVID quarantine days, which again have spanned the course of well over a year now, that it's been an easy environment for what I refer to as counting days. The world that we've been living in lately, where we've been asked to be isolated, to quarantine, to socially distance, to physically be separated from one another for now well over a year, has really led to an environment where it's easy to have the mindset of counting days. I know personally my family has been counting down the days until spring break. Spring break, is on the horizon, and is that signifying this time when maybe we're going to be able to get away, and many people that I know and families and groups are kind of have that on the horizon, as that's the time where maybe they're going to begin to be able to come out of social distancing and maybe get out of their own home and actually go somewhere, even if that's just getting in their car and driving a little bit further away from where they currently are. With the vaccine and the way everything is evolving, many people are counting the days until that happens. I know my children, we got 3 weasels, one in each level. We've got a middle schooler, a high schooler, and an elementary schooler. Every single one of them is already kind of counting the days to when this school year is over. There's people that are certainly counting the days. I can't tell you how many people that I've run into or that I've talked to over Zoom or within the teams and organizations that I serve that are just counting the days until the next time they can take that trip that they've been so wanting to take. People that have been counting the days till when is the time when they're finally going to be able to see those loved ones, those parents or grandparents or people friends that they've been socially distancing from in order to keep themselves safe, but also to be safe to those people that they love, counting the days until they're able to finally be with them again. And obviously, everybody also, there's the number of people within teams and organizations that are counting the days until when they're able to operate on a project in a new way or collaborate outside of the virtual only world, till that time when they can get to that next project or that event where they're finally going to be able to be in the same space. Many people right now are counting days and have a mindset of counting days until we can do blank, 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 fill in the blank. Counting days. And this mindset is with us all right now. And so as I've thought about this, and I've realized this again for myself, I'm no different than anybody else. I also have things that I'm looking forward to. And it's easy to find ourselves falling into that trap of counting days. But I remembered an image of myself in college. I remember some of you that listen to this know that I went to Denison University and was lucky enough and privileged to get to play basketball at Denison. And so I remember during my years in college, I remember one day in particular of walking into our locker room, our team locker room. And I came walking in there, and this was during the dog days of preseason, when every day is a strenuous workout after workout, lifting and running and agility drills and all of these things that are prepping us for the season ahead. And yet it's a ways out until you're going to get to really have a game or anything of significance that excites you. And so you're right in the kind of dog days of workouts and preparation. And I remember walking in to the locker room, and typically as we would walk into our locker room down a long corridor before we would come out into the basketball locker room, there was our coach would put a quote or the schedule for the day or something right in front of us for us to look at as we entered the locker room. And I remember on one of these days walking in for that workout, that training, that monotonous work that, again, during these dog days, and walking in feeling tired. And the quote that was right there on the wall was a quote that in big words said, "Don't count the days, make the days count." Don't count the days, make the days count. And typically when I would, the routine of walking into the locker room to get myself dressed, get myself ready for whatever the workout or whatever the practice or training was, you walk in, you're tired, you've come from class or you've come from wherever you are, and you're coming there, and then it's time to, flip the switch and make sure that you're getting into that mindset and getting in the mode for practice and getting yourself ready again for another workout and another, time of preparation. Oftentimes I would stop and I would read, what is the schedule, and I'd look at it quickly, but then I would, reflect for a second and keep on walking and go get my practice gear on and get ready to go. But for some reason with this one, I came walking in and I was in a daze and I read the schedule and I saw that, and then all of a sudden I just kind of stopped for a second. And that quote seemed to stick out to me more than others. Don't count the days, make the days count. Now, you may be listening to this and you may be thinking about a typical sports reference, or you may be thinking about that sounds like just a cheesy cliche or a quote that really isn't all that important. Is this just simple motivation, that kind of shot in the arm type of motivation that some people think about? Or, I've talked about on this that real motivation isn't about a simple shot in the arm or a pill we take that magically makes us motivated, but real motivation is something that we have to do daily to find new ways to get ourselves motivated. So you might hear that quote and you say, oh, that's a rah-rah simple motivation thing. Or you may think of it and you may say, there may be some simplicity to that statement, but maybe there's some wisdom within those words. And this idea that mentally how easy it is for us to count days and always be thinking about the future and counting the days until we get to do that thing we want to do, versus realizing we're excited about whatever is to come, but what does it mean to truly, in our mind and in our heart, bring us back to what does it look like instead of counting the days until something? How do we make today count that will actually better prepare us for whatever we're lucky to do next, whatever is next upon our path? And in that, all of a sudden the statement moves from simple motivation to maybe important wisdom, and that shift of our mindset from counting days to what does it look like to truly make them count. You may remember on past podcasts that I've done, this one in particular where I talked about the difference between managing time. So often we get stuck, we as leaders, and certainly epidemic across teams and organizations, where we get, really managing time. And any of you on this listening to this podcast right now probably this resonates with you, is to thinking about waking up and rushing through a day and just kind of managing your schedule, and you're rushing from thing to thing, and you've got a lot on your plate and you've got a lot of things swirling, and really it's just kind of how do you manage your way through a day. And so many people live in this environment of managing time and this kind of busyness. And yet on that podcast, if you remember, I talked about the difference between just managing time and investing in time. That investing in time requires that shift of our mind, and it's a different approach to how we even schedule our time, how we as individuals, the things that are most important to us, and certainly within teams and organizations, do we invest our time in the highest priorities and the things that need our focus and our attention the most, or do we end up just managing our time in a reactionary kind of fashion? And then rather than just managing time, I talked about, I choose and believe that the most effective in the world, effective humans, effective fill in the blank, husbands, wives, friends, and certainly leaders, teams, and organizations are the ones that not just manage time, but they choose to focus on and invest time in understanding what is their mission, what are we actually trying to accomplish, and think about investing their time rather than just managing it towards that mission that's in front of them. Investing time is about engaging our mind and heart in the moment to moment, in the most important elements in life and work now, which then helps us invest in a future that is yet to be created. And so rather than counting days, it truly is this process of then making the day that we're in, the only day that we really have, the cheesy or cliched, but absolutely true statement that today is a gift, that it's the only day, the only thing that we really have is that time that's right in front of us. And you may remember, you've probably seen this everywhere, but I've referenced it before, that graphic that shows the 4 quadrants of how we typically spend our time in an average day. There's 4, quadrants, and up in the left-hand corner, there's the things that are urgent, things that are coming up every day that seem urgent, but they're really not important. Those things that, that people come to us with where it may be urgent to them or feels urgent to them, but in the big scheme of whatever our mission or purpose is, it's really not important stuff. And yet we can find ourselves kind of living in that upper left-hand quadrant of time where we're always putting out fires, but it's urgent, or it feels like urgent things, but it's really not that important. And then there's the not urgent and not important quadrant that we can find ourselves spending time in, not urgent and not important. So we can just end up doing busy tasks that just kind of keep us busy and kind of manage and or fill our time. But the tasks that we're performing, or the things that we're giving our eyes and our focus and our attention and our heart to, are neither urgent, meaning that there is no urgency to what we're doing, and in the big scheme of things, they're really not all that important for whatever the mission is that we're trying to progress. And yet we can find ourselves living in that space of not urgent and not important. And then there's the quadrant of not urgent, but absolutely important. So the space of something that of planning, of visioning, of thinking about the future and preparing ourselves for the future. And so it's not urgent, it's not directly in front of us, but yet it's that preparing ourselves, and it's that important work of understanding why are we doing it, where are we actually trying to go, and how are we committed to getting there. So this is the quadrant which oftentimes is the easy one to pass by because it doesn't feel like it's urgent, but yet it's really important stuff. And in a lot of the work that I do with leaders and teams, and then across entire companies and organizations, this is a space which, again, it may not feel urgent. It may not be directly tied to what they're doing that day or the next day, but to have a team retreat or a session, an annual meeting, a gathering of their people, a culture session to be together. And it's not urgent right there in the moment, but it's absolutely critical, important to what you're building and the vision for what you're trying to create in the future. And yet that's a quadrant that we often bypass because we get distracted, and it's easy to stay in that non-urgent and non-important, or that urgent but not important space. And then lastly, the quadrant that we want to make sure that we are getting to more times than not, the one that is urgent, meaning there is urgency to our what needs our eyes, our focus, our attention, our heart today, and it's absolutely important. Those things that arise today that are aligned with our mission, the purpose of what we're trying to do, they're absolutely in alignment with that, and they happen to be time sensitive. They need our attention today. But yet the mental gymnastics that we go through every single day to make sure, are we counting days? And are we getting fixated out into the future, but then we're really spending our time actually in those quadrants of non-urgent and non-important things? Or are we understanding that vision for the future, and because of that important vision and mission of where we're trying to go individually or collectively, that then we shift that mindset to make sure we say, how do we make today count? How do we live in that quadrant of urgency and importance so that we can bring our very best, so that we're not just counting days, but we truly are making days count? I've talked about, again, many times the reference, I love this language, where we look is where we go. What we invest our focus, our time, our energy, our heart, and absolutely our eyes into, what we give our attention to is what we end up creating. Where we look is where we end up going. And so shifting our mindset into that thinking around, well, how do I make today count? And making today count so that it is in alignment with what is most important and what is that mission and purpose for either your own life or certainly whatever your team and organization, whatever those goals or why you've been brought together to accomplish something that's greater than you. And the reality is that there's a finite reality to most things we're involved with. Of course, again, another podcast I reference, and I talk about the difference between a finite life and the infinite life. The finite, kind of thinking, and yet the infinite thinking that teams and organizations need to bring to thinking about the future, and how do they realize that the work they do lives on well beyond them. But there is a finite reality to everything that we do. Of course, a finite reality to life, whether we want to admit it or not. There's only so much time that we get to do these things, that we get to live in the time and space that we're in. But also there's just a finite shelf life for almost every stage of life. And so you may be a part of a team right now, and again, sports teams are a really easy reference because there is just an obvious finite time. That team I referenced just a few minutes ago is that there's only a few years where you get to be a part of that college basketball team. There's only a finite number of games that you get to have before it's gone. And before then, even the best players in the world, from Michael Jordan or LeBron James, who is extending that career, or Serena Williams, or whoever, Steve Jobs, there was a finite amount of time that we get in order to do what we do. So you may be on a team right now where you love this current phase of your life. The team you're on, you feel aligned, you feel energized, you're compelled by the mission, and you feel alignment and excitement around what you are creating together. And to realize that there's a finiteness that is with that, meaning that probably won't last forever. And so in that understanding that there is a finite time for what you're experiencing, even as great as it may be, helps us hopefully shift our mind to, how do I then embrace and make today count? Because I realize that this won't last forever. And yes, there will be other great things ahead, of course, and other ways that new teams, new groups, new missions, new things to form that hopefully then will get us excited. And then there will be a next way to make those days count. But for the ones you're in, there is a finite time to it. You also may be a part of a team or an organization right now, or a relationship right now that it isn't exactly what you want. It's not bringing out the best in you. There isn't great alignment. There's a lot of negativity or blame or whatever that might be. And so you might not be in a great space where you're wanting to embrace and hold on to it forever. But at the same time, how you get to the next thing won't be because of just counting the days and holding your breath, but will be dependent on and how gracefully you travel from that current reality to whatever that next thing is your ability to shift in your mindset. What does it look like then for me to make this day count? Some are seeking newness. Some relationships right now are ready for the next one, or the time has kind of come and gone. And so, not every team, not every organization, is going to last forever and breathe kind of oxygen into it in those positive ways. And sometimes, though, even in the midst of challenges, we need to make sure, how do we breathe life and how do we make the most of today, so that we can take the next step and allow ourselves to move into that space where we live in that quadrant again of urgency and excitement and importance around the mission and the progress that we're trying to stimulate. And so it really is about investing today and making sure that we're living in that space. Part of that mindset shift of how then do we make today count, there's 3 things that I think about. Making today count is about how do I find joy today? Again, whether you feel like right now as you're listening to this, you're in the midst of relationships and teams and organizations where you're on fire and you feel so excited and so a part of the mission and everything, and you have great energy, then it's how do you continue to find joy in what you're doing today? And even if you're somebody, again, who's in an environment or part of a team or organization or relationships right now that you're struggling and you're in a space where it's those monotonous, tough days, that still in that moment, the mindset shift of making time, count, not just counting days, but making the day count to find joy and to seek out, how can I make joy and be a part of joy today? To focus on then what does progress towards our mission look like today? Not to the finish line, but what does to make sure that we understand and say, today I have a great opportunity to make progress towards whatever that mission is of what we're doing together and my role in this. So find joy, focus on progress, and then lastly, clarity around what is that next action, identifying what is that next action that we need to do in order to make today count. Make it count. What am I going to go do and what are we going to do to stimulate that progress, to live in that joyous spirit, and again, not just be stuck in those monotonous days of counting days. So, counting days is that obsessive and focused on the future, but really then in that monotonous kind of spinning our wheels kind of way. And making days count is about now, in the present moment, with intentionality, making an investment today in joy, in progress, in clarity of action, so that we can create that future tomorrow. The most effective and compelling humans, leaders, teams, on the planet invest their days, invest their weeks, their months, their years, and their lives in this important elements of making days count rather than getting trapped in that mindset of just counting days. So the questions, I start to ask myself, and I also then begin to think about and invite you to think about too, are you counting days or are you making the days count? In these times when it's so easy and we've all been in this monotonous pattern, are we just counting the days, or what would it mean to shift our minds and our hearts to what does it look like to make these days count? Because where we look and where we go. So, some questions I would leave you with, other than that large one of just, are you counting the days or are you making the days count during these monotonous times? Questions I would offer up for reflection is, take an inventory of your average days. Step back and look at your schedule. Look at the way that you are spending and investing your time in an average day. Think about that. Where are you investing your mindset and your time? Is it mostly in those kind of counting the days and just going through the routines? Is it in that quadrant of not urgent and not important stuff? Or as you look at that inventory, step back and think about, are there areas where are you investing your mind and your heart and your time in that more urgent and important quadrant, or maybe in that space of not urgency, but absolutely important about the future that you're trying to create? What does it look like to make today count rather than just happen? And what is the action? What will it look like to bring joy, to bring a focus of what does progress look like? And then what's the clarity next action that will help you transition from just counting today to just happening and making today count? Remember, we can either manage time or invest time, and where we look is where we go. So don't just count days. Let's make days count. Thank you for listening to today's podcast. and I hope the messages and questions stimulate positive change along your path. As always, if these messages resonate with you and add value to your life, I hope you'll help amplify them throughout the world. Please rate, comment, and share on whatever podcast or social media platform you're using. And share this podcast with the people in your life or work who should be part of these conversations. That way, this spirit does, in fact, spread. If these messages or developing leaders and culture would be helpful to your organization, or you have a question or comment about this podcast, please contact us at jasonvbarger.com. And remember, we all are ambassadors for the culture we want to create in our life and work. We have to own the vision we want to be a part of. The future of leadership is you, is me, is us. Be a thermostat.